Everyone thought I hit my wife. Even my own mother wouldn't look me in the eye. But the truth was buried in a single conversation, one she never knew I recorded. My name is Landon Reese, and I've been a structural engineer in Atlanta for over 12 years. I spend my days analyzing the integrity of buildings, calculating stress points, anticipating cracks before they appear. Funny how I could see those in concrete, but I never saw the ones forming in my own marriage. At first, things with Heather felt solid. We met through friends, married 3 years later, and had our son Eli not long after. Heather was bright, charming, and passionate about family, or at least that's who I thought she was. Looking back now, I realize she was good at playing roles, and I was too willing to believe in the one she played for me. We lived in a modest house on the north side, the kind of place you imagine raising kids in. I worked long hours, but I always made time for Eli. Bath time, bedtime stories, Saturday mornings building Lego cities, those were my rituals. Heather stayed home for a while, then took a part-time job at a local law firm. She said she needed the space, and I respected that. But around that time, things began to shift, subtle at first. She started pulling away, less affection, more tension. Conversations felt like interviews. She'd ask where I was going, how long I'd be gone, what I'd been doing, not like a partner, but like someone collecting data. I chalked it up to stress. Parenting, work, life, it weighs on people differently, so I gave her space. I picked up extra chores, handled more with Eli, and tried to keep peace at home. But the distance only grew. She started locking her phone, whispering during calls, and spending more time working late. One night, I found her crying in the bathroom. I asked what was wrong, and she snapped at me, accused me of never understanding her, of always making her feel like she was walking on eggshells. I stood there, stunned. That wasn't true. If anything, I was the one treading lightly, trying to avoid another fight. That night was the first time I felt a real crack in our foundation, not just tension, but something deeper. Like there was another version of our marriage that only she saw. And I didn't know it yet, but she was already preparing to use that version against me. After that night in the bathroom, Heather's coldness wasn't just emotional, it became deliberate, almost calculated. She stopped coming to bed, leaving me alone to watch Eli fall asleep. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd brush me off with vague answers or change the subject. It felt like the warmth in our home was draining, and no matter what I did, I couldn't plug the leak. Her phone became a fortress. She guarded it like it held secrets I wasn't supposed to know. I didn't snoop. That wasn't who I was, but the walls were closing in. I started noticing how she'd flinch when I entered a room, or how her eyes darted away when I tried to talk about our future. One evening, she came home later than usual, smelling like a stranger's perfume. When I mentioned it, she laughed it off, but the cold smile didn't reach her eyes. I felt a knot tighten in my chest, a silent warning that the woman I loved was slipping away. Work became my refuge. I buried myself in blueprints and project meetings, anything to avoid the suffocating silence at home. But even there, I couldn't escape the dread. Friends started asking if Heather and I were okay. I lied and said yes, but inside I was unraveling. One night, Eli asked if Mommy and Daddy were going to be okay. His innocent question broke me. I realized I didn't know the answer. Heather wasn't just distant, she was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone I feared. I tried talking to her again, hoping for clarity, for a chance to fix what was breaking. But she shut me out completely, accusing me of being controlling, of not trusting her. I was stunned. None of it made sense. It was as if she was building a wall, not just between us, but around herself. And I was left outside, desperate to understand why. The tension grew thick. Our home, once a place of laughter and love, was now a battlefield of silence and suspicion. I was scared of losing Heather, scared of losing Eli, and scared of what was coming next. Little did I know, the real storm was just beginning. Heather wasn't just withdrawing, she was planning something far worse. Something that would shatter everything I thought I knew about our family. The day Heather told my family, I hit her felt like the moment the ground beneath me crumbled into dust. It started with a call from my mother. Her voice was quiet but cold, something I hadn't heard before. "Landon, we need to talk, you need to come home." I didn't understand. I rushed over, heart pounding, hoping maybe it was something simple, a family emergency or Eli needing a doctor. But when I arrived, the room was thick with tension. Heather was there, sitting stiffly on the couch, her eyes locked on the floor. My parents, my sister, they were all watching me, eyes heavy with disappointment and worry. And then my mother said it. Heather told us you hit her." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt numb, like I was outside my body watching a nightmare unfold. Hit her, me? I'd never even raised my voice, let alone laid a hand on her. I asked them to listen to hear my side, but the damage was done. Their faces were a mix of fear, sadness, and doubt. I saw the flicker of betrayal in their eyes, not just from Heather's words, but from the years they'd spent trusting me being questioned in a single sentence. I pleaded, trying to explain that Heather was upset, that something was wrong between us but not violence. My words sounded hollow even to me. Heather didn't deny it. She stayed silent, her lips pressed tight like she was holding back a secret. Later, she'd tell me it was necessary, that she had no choice. That moment shattered me, not because of the accusation itself, but because my own family believed it. The people I loved most turned away, unsure if I was still the man they thought they knew. My phone buzzed nonstop, messages from friends asking if I was okay, from coworkers wondering what was going on. Rumors spread faster than I could stop them. But the worst was Eli. I saw the confusion in his eyes when he asked why Mommy and Daddy weren't together anymore. I wanted to explain, to tell him the truth, but I didn't know where to start. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how something so unthinkable could happen. How the woman I loved could tear apart everything with a lie. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just about us. It was about something bigger. Something she wanted, and I was going to have to fight harder than I ever imagined to protect what was mine. After Heather's accusation, everything around me started to crumble, not just my marriage, but my entire world. My family's coldness was the hardest blow. The same people who once greeted me with hugs now avoided eye contact or whispered behind my back. My mom wouldn't answer my calls. My sister's texts were curt, distant. The home I grew up in felt like a stranger's house. Friends who I thought would stand by me slowly disappeared. At work, the rumor mill spun wild. I noticed how colleagues glanced at me sideways or dropped conversations when I entered the room. The whisper of "Did you hear about Landon?" followed me everywhere. The isolation was suffocating. I had never felt so alone, so misunderstood. Every breath felt heavy, every step uncertain. I wanted to scream the truth, to prove Heather was lying, but words felt useless against the storm she had unleashed. Eli was my anchor, but even he sensed the tension. He clung to me more tightly, eyes searching mine for answers I didn't have. His questions were simple but painful. "Is Mommy mad at you? Why doesn't anyone want to play with us anymore?" I forced smiles, hiding the chaos inside, but inside I was breaking. Nights were the worst. Lying awake, haunted by what I'd lost, my family's trust, my reputation, the life I thought was secure. I tried reaching out to Heather, hoping for a chance to talk, to fix whatever was tearing us apart. But every message was ignored, every call unanswered. It was like she was erasing me piece by piece. The custody of Eli suddenly felt like a distant hope. How could I protect him if no one believed me? I thought about giving up, walking away from a battle I was losing before it even began. But then I remembered Eli's face, his innocent trust in me, and I knew I couldn't. Not now, not ever. I needed proof, something undeniable that could show the real Heather behind the lies. But how could I find it when she had already built walls around herself? The fear of losing my son grew with every passing day. And deep inside, a quiet fire began to burn, a resolve to fight, to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Because sometimes, the only way to survive betrayal is to become stronger than the lie. When Heather filed for full custody of Eli, it felt like a gut punch I wasn't ready for. But somehow I knew this was coming. The accusation wasn't just about hurting me. It was about controlling everything I cared about. The custody papers hit my mailbox like a final judgment. She painted me as unstable, dangerous, a father unfit to care for our son. I stared at the documents, disbelief and fury swirling inside me. But beneath it all was a raw, aching fear, losing Eli. My first instinct was desperation. I needed to prove my innocence, to show the court that Heather's story was a lie. But how? Words felt hollow. The rumors, the accusations, they had already poisoned everything. I met with a lawyer, someone who could help me navigate the tangled web Heather had spun. She listened carefully, her eyes narrowing as I told my side. "We'll need evidence," she said firmly. "Something concrete that shows what really happened." That's when the plan started forming. I couldn't rely on anyone else. I had to protect Eli myself. I began paying attention to Heather's behavior, trying to find a crack in her carefully constructed story. Every call she made, every conversation, I noticed details I'd ignored before. There were moments when she let her guard down, when her anger and frustration slipped through. One afternoon, after a tense exchange, I managed to slip a small recorder into my pocket. It was a quiet gamble, risky maybe, but I needed to hear her words to catch her truth. I told myself it wasn't about revenge. It was about justice for Eli, about showing my son that his father wasn't the monster Heather claimed I was. The days that followed were a blur of tension. I replayed every conversation in my head, waiting for the right moment. And finally, during a heated argument, she said something I never expected. It was there, clear as day, her voice admitting the lies were for the custody fight, that she never cared about the truth, only about winning. That recording was more than evidence, it was hope. After that first slip, I knew I had to be careful. Heather was dangerous, not physically, but in the way she could twist words and manipulate everyone around her. I couldn't risk her finding out about the recorder or suspecting my plan. So I started small, quietly slipping the recorder into my pocket before we met, pretending nothing was wrong. The act itself felt strange, like I was spying on the woman I once loved. But protecting Eli meant crossing lines I never thought I would. During one of our conversations, the tension exploded. Heather's voice was sharp, filled with anger and frustration. That's when she said it, a chilling confession. "I told your family you hit me because I need to win this custody battle. No one will listen otherwise." Her words hit me harder than any accusation. She wasn't just lying to protect herself. She was weaponizing the truth, twisting it to destroy me. The recorder was running the whole time. I stayed calm on the outside, but inside I felt a surge of vindication. For the first time in months I had proof, real proof. I couldn't believe how easily she revealed the truth when she thought no one was listening. That night I listened to the recording again and again. Every word, every pause, every hint of guilt was there. It was raw, real, and damning. I knew I had to share it, with my lawyer, my family, and eventually the court. But first I had to be ready. Ready to face the fallout, ready to stand up not just for myself but for Eli. The hardest part was still ahead, exposing the lies to the people who had already turned away. But this time I wasn't alone. I had the truth on my side. And sometimes that's all you need. Taking the recorder to my lawyer felt like carrying a lifeline in my hands. After months of silence, suspicion, and heartbreak, this small device held the key to everything. We scheduled a meeting with my family first. I knew this was crucial. Without their trust, fighting for custody felt impossible. I gathered them in the living room, the air thick with tension. My mom, still guarded, my sister, wary but hopeful. Heather wasn't there. She'd refused to attend any family meetings since the accusation. With a shaking hand, I played the recording. Heather's voice filled the room, confessing that she fabricated the story about me hitting her, all for the custody battle. There was silence, heavy and sharp. Faces that had once doubted me now showed shock, regret, and disbelief. My mother's eyes welled up and she reached for my hand. "I'm so sorry, Landon," she whispered. It was the first moment I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they'd see me for who I really was again. The next step was the court. My lawyer submitted the recording as evidence, and I prepared myself for the hearing. Standing in that courtroom, I felt exposed and vulnerable, but also determined. When the judge listened to the recording, the atmosphere shifted. The falsehoods Heather had built her case on crumbled like dust. The custody battle turned in my favor. But even with the truth out, the wounds ran deep. Heather's betrayal wasn't just about the lie, it was about breaking the trust that had held our family together. The judge granted me temporary custody of Eli, citing my stable environment and the new evidence. It wasn't a complete victory yet, but it was a start. Walking out of the courthouse with Eli in my arms, I felt relief and responsibility all at once. I had won a battle, but the war to rebuild our family was just beginning. Holding Eli in my arms after the court ruling felt like a fragile victory, the kind that came with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. I knew the fight wasn't over, but at least I had a chance to start rebuilding what Heather's lies had shattered. The first weeks were a whirlwind of parenting and proving to everyone, especially Eli, that I was still his dad, the one who loved him no matter what. Eli's smile was the light in the darkness. Watching him laugh, learning his favorite new games, hearing his little voice call me daddy with trust, it reminded me why I fought so hard. But rebuilding trust with my family was just as important. I spent hours talking to my mom and sister, sharing the recordings, explaining the pain I'd been through. Their cautious support began to grow, though the scars from Heather's betrayal weren't easy to erase. Heather, meanwhile, was distant. She rarely reached out, and when she did, it was cold and defensive. I realized some bridges might never fully heal, but I had to focus on what mattered: Eli's happiness and stability. I took a step back from work to spend more time at home. I wanted Eli to know he could count on me, that our home was safe, and that no lie could take that away. Slowly, the tension lifted. Family dinners returned. Laughter crept back into conversations. But I also learned to protect myself, to be wary of trusting too quickly, to listen more closely to the quiet cracks before they grew too wide. Through it all, I grew stronger, not just as a father, but as a man who had faced betrayal and come out fighting. Just when I thought the worst was behind us, Heather made her final play, and it nearly broke me. After the court's decision, she was silent for weeks. No calls, no messages, no signs that she wanted to fight or reconcile. I hoped she'd finally accept the truth and let Eli's well-being come first. But then, out of nowhere, I got a call from her lawyer. Heather was appealing the custody decision, claiming new evidence and accusing me of trying to manipulate the court. I felt a surge of frustration and exhaustion. How many times would I have to prove myself? How much more could I take? The fight dragged on, each hearing reopening old wounds. Heather's bitterness seemed to grow, fueled by anger and a desperate need to win. But Eli was my reason to stand firm. Every time he hugged me or called me daddy, I remembered why I couldn't back down. One night, Heather showed up unexpectedly at my door, eyes wild and desperate. She demanded to see Eli, screaming accusations and blaming me for tearing the family apart. It was the most raw and vulnerable I'd ever seen her, but also the most dangerous. I stayed calm, refused to escalate, and called my lawyer. That night, I realized Heather's fight wasn't just about custody. It was about pain, loss, and fear. And maybe, beneath all the anger, there was still a part of her that wanted to heal. After that night, everything changed. Heather's sudden outburst forced us all to face the pain we'd been burying. We agreed to meet with a mediator, not just to discuss custody, but to talk honestly about what had broken us. It wasn't easy. Old wounds opened, tears flowed, and harsh truths came to light. But through those difficult conversations, a fragile understanding began to grow. Heather admitted her fear of losing Eli had pushed her to desperate measures. I shared my hurt at being falsely accused and my determination to protect our son no matter what. Slowly, we found common ground. Eli's happiness was the only thing that mattered. The court finally granted us joint custody, with a plan focused on cooperation and respect. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Most importantly, Eli began to heal. I watched him laugh again, playing freely between two homes, feeling loved by both his parents without the shadow of lies hanging over him. For me, the journey taught a hard truth: that love can survive even the darkest betrayals if you're willing to fight for it and for the ones you love. The recording that once felt like a weapon became a symbol, not of the battle, but of the truth that set us free. And as Eli looked up at me one evening and smiled, calling me Dad with pure trust, I knew that new beginnings were possible, that even broken families could find a way to heal. Because sometimes the greatest strength comes not from winning, but from forgiveness, hope, and the courage to move forward.